The morning sun cast long shadows across the Naval Academy's pristine grounds as 20-year-old Sarah Mitchell adjusted her crisp white uniform for what felt like the 100th time that day. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the electric anticipation that coursed through her veins. She was one of only 37 women in a class of 1,200 midshipmen, and every day felt like a test she couldn't afford to fail. Sarah's journey to this moment had begun in a small coastal town in Maine, where her father ran a modest fishing operation and her mother worked as a nurse at the local clinic. The Mitchell family wasn't wealthy, but they were rich in values that would shape Sarah's character for life. Her father, Thomas Mitchell, was a Vietnam veteran who had served as a Navy corpsman, and, though he rarely spoke about his service, Sarah could see the pride in his eyes whenever a naval vessel passed their harbor. Growing up, Sarah spent countless hours helping her father with his boat, learning the intricacies of navigation, weather patterns, and the demanding respect the ocean commanded. She developed an intuitive understanding of maritime operations that would later serve her well in her naval career. More importantly, she learned that the sea didn't care about your gender, your background, or your fears. It only responded to competence, preparation, and unwavering determination. Her mother, Margaret, was equally influential in shaping Sarah's character. As one of the few female nurses in their small community, Margaret had faced her own share of discrimination and skepticism. She taught Sarah that respect wasn't automatically given, it had to be earned through consistent excellence and quiet confidence. "Never demand respect," Margaret would tell her daughter during their evening walks along the rocky shore. "Command it through your actions." The decision to attend the Naval Academy hadn't been easy. Sarah had received offers from several prestigious universities, including MIT and Stanford, where she could have pursued her love of engineering without the additional challenges that came with being a woman in the military. But something about the naval tradition called to her. Perhaps it was watching the destroyers and cruisers navigate the waters near her hometown, or maybe it was the stories her father occasionally shared about the camaraderie and purpose he had found in naval service. When Sarah received her appointment to the academy, the local newspaper ran a small story about the town's first female midshipman. The reaction was mixed. Some community members were proud and supportive, while others questioned whether women belonged in combat roles. Sarah's high school principal, Mr. Edwards, pulled her aside before graduation and warned her that she would face challenges that her male classmates would never encounter. "You'll have to be twice as good to get half the recognition," he said with genuine concern. "Are you sure you're ready for that?" Sarah's response was simple but telling, "I'm not ready for it to be easy. I'm ready for it to be worth it." The first year at the academy was brutal for everyone, but Sarah felt the additional weight of representation. She wasn't just trying to survive the rigorous academic and military training, she was proving that women could handle everything the academy threw at them. The physical demands were intense, daily workouts that pushed her to her limits, obstacle courses that tested every muscle in her body, and sailing exercises that demanded both physical strength and technical expertise. Academically, Sarah excelled in her engineering and navigation courses, often ranking in the top 5% of her class. She had an intuitive grasp of complex systems and could solve problems that stumped many of her classmates. But it was her leadership qualities that truly set her apart. During her second year, she was selected as a squad leader, responsible for mentoring younger midshipmen and maintaining discipline within her unit. The real test came during her third year when the academy faced a crisis that would define Sarah's reputation for years to come. A severe storm had damaged several training vessels, and the academy needed to organize a complex rescue and recovery operation. The exercise was designed to test the midshipman's ability to work under pressure and coordinate multiple moving parts simultaneously. Sarah found herself assigned to a team led by Michael Patterson, a midshipman who had made no secret of his belief that women had no place in naval operations. Patterson was smart and capable, but he was also arrogant and dismissive of anyone he considered inferior. When the exercise began, he immediately assigned Sarah to what he considered a safe role, communications coordinator, essentially sidelining her from the main action. But Sarah had been studying the weather patterns and maritime conditions for weeks. She recognized that Patterson's planned approach would put the rescue vessels at serious risk due to underwater currents and shifting sandbars that weren't marked on the standard charts. When she tried to voice her concerns, Patterson cut her off dismissively. "Mitchell, just stick to your radio work and let the real sailors handle the navigation." The dismissal stung, but Sarah didn't let it derail her focus. Instead, she quietly began working on an alternative plan, using her extensive knowledge of coastal waters and her engineering background to calculate safer approach routes. She also reached out to several other team members who had expressed private concerns about Patterson's strategy. As the exercise progressed, it became clear that Patterson's approach was indeed problematic. 2 of the simulated rescue vessels became grounded on sandbars, and the entire operation was at risk of failure. The evaluating officers were growing concerned, and Patterson was beginning to panic as his carefully planned operation fell apart. That's when Sarah stepped forward. Not with accusations or blame, but with solutions. She presented her alternative plan clearly and calmly, backing up every recommendation with detailed calculations and maritime knowledge that impressed even the senior officers observing the exercise. More importantly, she presented it in a way that allowed Patterson to save face, framing her suggestions as modifications to his original plan rather than wholesale replacements. The revised approach worked perfectly. The rescue operation was completed successfully, and Sarah's team received the highest marks in the exercise. But what impressed the evaluating officers most wasn't just her technical competence, it was her leadership style. She had identified a problem, developed a solution, and implemented it without creating unnecessary conflict or undermining her team leader's authority. After the exercise, Commander Robert Hayes, one of the senior instructors, pulled Sarah aside. Hayes was a respected officer with 30 years of naval experience, and his opinion carried significant weight at the academy. "Mitchell," he said, "I've been watching you for 3 years now, and what I saw today confirms what I've suspected all along. You have the instincts of a natural leader. But, more than that, you understand that true leadership isn't about being right, it's about getting the right results while bringing everyone along with you." The conversation with Commander Hayes marked a turning point in Sarah's academy experience. Word of her performance in the rescue exercise spread throughout the academy, and she found that many of her classmates began seeking her advice and input on complex problems. Even some who had initially been skeptical of women in military roles began to recognize her capabilities. But Sarah never let the recognition go to her head. She remembered her mother's lessons about earning respect through consistent performance, not just memorable moments. She continued to excel in her studies, particularly in naval engineering and strategic planning. She also made it a point to mentor younger female midshipmen who were facing the same challenges she had encountered in her early years. During her final year at the academy, Sarah was selected as brigade commander, one of the highest honors a midshipman could receive. The position made her responsible for the discipline and performance of over 4,000 midshipmen, a responsibility that would have intimidated many experienced officers, let alone a 22-year-old student. Her selection wasn't without controversy. Some alumni and even a few faculty members questioned whether a woman should hold such a prominent leadership position. Sarah was aware of the criticism, but she chose to respond the same way she always had, through excellence and quiet confidence. Under her leadership, the brigade achieved record performance levels in both academic and military exercises. The graduation ceremony was held on a perfect May morning, with families gathered from across the country to watch their sons and daughters become commissioned officers in the United States Navy. Sarah's parents sat in the front row, her father wearing his old Navy dress uniform for the first time in decades and her mother beaming with pride. When Sarah's name was called and she stepped forward to receive her commission as Ensign Sarah Mitchell, the applause was thunderous. She had not only survived the academy, she had thrived and set an example for every woman who would follow in her footsteps. But, as she stood there, hand raised in salute, Sarah knew that graduation wasn't the end of her journey, it was just the beginning. The real Navy awaited, with all its challenges and opportunities. Sarah was ready to prove that the lessons she had learned and the character she had developed at the academy could translate into effective leadership in the real world. She had no way of knowing that her greatest test would come not in combat or crisis, but in a conference room where her authority would be challenged by the very institution she had devoted her life to serving. As she left the academy that day, Ensign Sarah Mitchell carried with her more than just a commission and a diploma. She carried the hopes and dreams of every young woman who had ever wondered if she could succeed in a man's world, and the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you've earned your place through merit, determination, and unwavering integrity. Ensign Sarah Mitchell's first assignment took her to the USS Constellation, a guided missile frigate based out of Norfolk, Virginia. The ship was commanded by Captain James Rodriguez, a seasoned officer known for his fair but demanding leadership style. Rodriguez had specifically requested Sarah for his engineering department after reviewing her academy records and speaking with Commander Hayes about her exceptional problem-solving abilities. The Constellation was an older vessel, commissioned in the late 1980s, and, like many ships of her generation, she required constant maintenance and creative solutions to keep her systems operating at peak efficiency. Sarah's engineering background and intuitive understanding of complex systems made her an immediate asset to the ship's operations, but she quickly learned that theoretical knowledge and real-world application were very different things. Her first real challenge came just 3 weeks into her assignment. The ship was conducting training exercises off the coast of Virginia when the primary electrical distribution system began showing irregular power fluctuations. The chief engineer, Lieutenant Commander Patricia Wells, was on shore leave, and the remaining engineering team was struggling to identify the source of the problem. The fluctuations were affecting critical navigation and communication systems, and Captain Rodriguez was growing increasingly concerned about the ship's operational readiness. Sarah had been observing the troubleshooting efforts when she noticed something that the more experienced engineers had missed. The power fluctuations followed a pattern that corresponded with the ship's movement through different sea states. Drawing on her academy training and her childhood experience with marine electrical systems, she suspected that the problem wasn't with the distribution system itself, but with the grounding connections that were affected by the ship's flexing in heavy seas. It was a theory that went against conventional wisdom, and suggesting it meant contradicting engineers with far more experience than her own. Sarah wrestled with the decision for several hours, knowing that if she was wrong, it could damage her credibility early in her career. But she also knew that if the problem wasn't identified and corrected, it could put the entire ship at risk. Finally, she approached the senior engineering petty officer, Master Chief Robert Thompson, a 24-year veteran who had served on 7 different ships and had earned the respect of every officer he had worked with. Thompson listened carefully as Sarah explained her theory, asking pointed questions that tested both her technical knowledge and her reasoning process. "Ensign," Thompson said after she finished her explanation, "that's either the most brilliant diagnosis I've heard in years, or the most rookie mistake you could make. But your reasoning is sound, and, frankly, we're running out of conventional options. Let's test your theory, but we do it methodically and safely." Working together, Sarah and Thompson's team isolated the suspected grounding connections and found exactly what Sarah had predicted: corrosion and loose connections that were creating intermittent failures as the ship's hull flexed in rough seas. The repair took 18 hours of careful work, but when it was complete, the power fluctuations disappeared entirely. Captain Rodriguez was impressed not only with Sarah's technical diagnosis but also with the way she had presented her findings. She hadn't tried to take credit or bypass the chain of command. Instead, she had worked through the proper channels and given credit to the entire team for the solution. "That's the mark of a real leader," Rodriguez told her during her first performance review. "Technical competence is expected in this Navy, but the wisdom to know how to use that competence effectively, that's what separates good officers from great ones." Word of Sarah's diagnostic skills spread throughout the Norfolk Naval Base, and she began receiving requests from other ships to assist with complex engineering problems. She always approached these challenges with the same methodical process: listen carefully to the symptoms, analyze the data objectively, consider unconventional possibilities, and present solutions in a way that respected the expertise of the existing crew. After 18 months on the Constellation, Sarah was promoted to lieutenant junior grade and transferred to the USS Defender, a newer destroyer where she would serve as assistant engineering officer. The Defender was scheduled for a 6-month deployment to the Persian Gulf, and Sarah would be getting her first taste of operational sailing in a potentially hostile environment. The deployment began routinely, with the Defender joining a carrier battle group for exercises in the Mediterranean before transiting through the Suez Canal into the Red Sea. Sarah threw herself into learning every aspect of the ship's operations, spending her off-duty hours studying tactical manuals and observing bridge operations whenever possible. The ship's executive officer, Commander David Walsh, noticed her dedication and began including her in planning sessions that were typically reserved for department heads. Walsh was known as a demanding but fair officer who had a talent for identifying and developing promising junior officers. He became an informal mentor to Sarah, challenging her to think beyond just her engineering responsibilities and consider the broader tactical and strategic implications of naval operations. Mitchell, Walsh told her during one of their discussions, "You have excellent technical skills, and that will always serve you well. But, if you want to command ships someday, you need to understand that engineering is just one piece of the puzzle. You need to think like a tactician, a diplomat, and a leader all at the same time." The real test came during the fourth month of the deployment when tensions in the region escalated and the Defender was tasked with escort duty for civilian merchant vessels transiting through disputed waters. The assignment required constant vigilance and perfect coordination between all departments on the ship. Sarah was on duty in the engineering spaces when the ship received intelligence about a potential threat from small boat attacks. The captain ordered the ship to increase speed and alter course, but, as the Defender began her acceleration, Sarah noticed irregularities in the propulsion system that could indicate serious mechanical problems. She faced a difficult decision. The irregularities might represent normal variations that could be safely ignored, or they could be early warnings of a catastrophic failure that would leave the ship dead in the water in hostile territory. Reporting the concerns would likely require the captain to reduce speed and alter his tactical plans, potentially putting the merchant vessels at greater risk. Sarah's training kicked in. She quickly gathered data from multiple monitoring systems and ran diagnostic checks on the propulsion components. The patterns she was seeing suggested bearing wear in the main reduction gear, not immediately dangerous, but something that could lead to complete failure if the ship continued operating at high speed for extended periods. She called the bridge immediately and reported her findings to Commander Walsh, who was serving as officer of the deck. Walsh understood the implications immediately and called Captain Morrison to the bridge. Within minutes, Sarah found herself in the Combat Information Center, explaining her analysis to the ship's senior officers while they developed an alternative tactical plan. Captain Morrison was a veteran of multiple deployments who had earned his reputation through sound judgment under pressure. He listened carefully to Sarah's report, asked several technical questions to verify her analysis, and then made the decision to reduce speed and request additional escort support from other vessels in the area. "Lieutenant Mitchell," he said after the immediate crisis had passed, "you may have just saved this ship and crew from a very dangerous situation. More importantly, you demonstrated the kind of judgment that this Navy needs in its officers. You identified a real problem, presented it clearly and objectively, and gave us the information we needed to make good tactical decisions." The propulsion system was repaired during a scheduled port visit 2 weeks later, and the inspection confirmed that Sarah's diagnosis had been accurate. The bearing wear was more advanced than the diagnostic systems had indicated, and continued high-speed operation would likely have resulted in complete failure within days. The successful deployment aboard the Defender marked Sarah as a rising star in the Navy's engineering community, but she had also gained recognition for her tactical awareness and sound judgment under pressure. When she returned to Norfolk, she found transfer orders waiting for her. She had been selected for the prestigious Naval Postgraduate School in Monterey, California, where she would pursue advanced studies in naval engineering and strategic studies. The 2 years at the Naval Postgraduate School were intellectually challenging in ways that were different from her academy experience. Here, she was studying alongside officers from all branches of the military, many with significant operational experience. The academic environment encouraged critical thinking and challenged conventional approaches to military problems. Sarah's thesis focused on the integration of new technologies into existing naval platforms, examining how rapid technological advancement was changing the nature of naval warfare. Her research caught the attention of senior officers in the Pentagon who were grappling with similar questions about modernization and force structure. During her second year at the school, Sarah met Lieutenant Commander Mark Stevens, a submarine officer who was pursuing studies in international relations. Stevens was intelligent, thoughtful, and shared Sarah's passion for naval service. Their relationship developed slowly, built on mutual respect and shared values rather than just attraction. Mark understood the challenges that Sarah faced as a woman in the Navy, and he never tried to minimize or dismiss her experiences. He also recognized her ambition and supported her career goals without reservation. When they decided to get married during Sarah's final semester at the school, they both knew they were committing not just to each other, but to the complex challenge of balancing two demanding naval careers. After graduation, Sarah was promoted to lieutenant and assigned as the engineering officer aboard the USS Valiant, a newer destroyer that was considered one of the most prestigious assignments available to officers of her rank. The Valiant was commanded by Captain Susan Bradley, who had the distinction of being one of the first women to command a major surface combatant. Captain Bradley became another important mentor in Sarah's career. Bradley had faced many of the same challenges that Sarah was encountering, but 20 years earlier when there were even fewer women in senior naval positions. She provided Sarah with insights not just about technical and tactical matters, but about the unique challenges of being a woman leader in the military. Sarah, Bradley told her during one of their private discussions, "You're going to face situations where people will question your authority simply because you're a woman. When that happens, don't waste time being angry or trying to prove them wrong through arguments. Prove them wrong through results. Excellence is the only argument that really matters." Under Bradley's leadership, Sarah continued to develop her skills as both an engineer and a naval officer. She led complex maintenance projects, managed large teams of sailors, and participated in high-level planning for major exercises and operations. Her reputation for technical competence and sound judgment continued to grow, and she began receiving recognition from officers outside the engineering community. The Valiant's deployment to the Western Pacific provided Sarah with exposure to the complex geopolitical environment in that region and the crucial role that naval forces played in maintaining stability. She participated in joint exercises with allied navies and observed firsthand how naval diplomacy worked in practice. By the time Sarah completed her tour aboard the Valiant, she had been promoted to lieutenant commander and was being considered for her first independent command. The path ahead was becoming clearer. If she continued to excel and demonstrate leadership potential, she could realistically aspire to command her own ship and eventually reach the senior ranks of the Navy. But Sarah was also beginning to understand that technical competence alone wouldn't be enough to reach the highest levels of naval leadership. She would need to master the political and diplomatic aspects of military service, develop her strategic thinking abilities, and prove that she could inspire and lead large organizations under the most challenging circumstances. The Navy was changing, slowly but steadily becoming more accepting of women in leadership roles. Sarah had benefited from the pioneering efforts of officers like Captain Bradley, who had proven that women could successfully command ships and lead sailors in combat. But she also knew that each step forward required continued excellence and that any significant failure could set back progress for all women in the Navy. As she prepared for her next assignment, Sarah reflected on how far she had come since that nervous morning at the Naval Academy. She had proven herself as an engineer, a leader, and a naval officer. But the biggest challenges of her career still lay ahead, and she would soon discover that sometimes the greatest tests come not from enemy action or technical failures, but from within the very institution you have dedicated your life to serving. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell stood on the pier at Naval Station San Diego, watching as tugboats maneuvered the USS Intrepid into position alongside the dock. In 3 hours, she would take command of the guided missile frigate, becoming one of the youngest officers and only the 4th woman ever to command a ship of this class. The moment represented the culmination of 12 years of naval service and the fulfillment of a dream she had harbored since her first day at the Naval Academy. The Intrepid was an older vessel, commissioned in 1991, but she had been recently upgraded with modern combat systems and was considered one of the most capable frigates in the Pacific Fleet. The ship's crew of 180 sailors would soon become Sarah's responsibility, and she felt the full weight of that obligation as she watched the final docking procedures. Captain Bradley, who had flown out from Norfolk to attend the change of command ceremony, stood beside Sarah as they observed the ship's arrival. "Remember everything we talked about during your tour on the Valiant," Bradley said quietly. "Command is different from anything you've experienced before. Every decision you make affects not just the mission, but the lives and families of every sailor on that ship. Trust your training, trust your instincts, and never forget that your crew's welfare is your first responsibility." The change of command ceremony was a traditional naval affair, with representatives from the Pacific Fleet Command, local dignitaries, and families of the crew in attendance. Sarah's parents had flown in from Maine, and her husband Mark, now a commander serving on the staff of Naval Submarine Forces Pacific, stood proudly in the front row as Sarah took the oath of command. As the ceremonial duties concluded and the last guests departed, Sarah found herself alone with her new executive officer, Lieutenant Commander James Patterson. Patterson was an experienced surface warfare officer with 14 years of service, and Sarah had requested him specifically based on his reputation for exceptional operational expertise and his ability to work effectively with diverse leadership styles. "Captain," Patterson said, using Sarah's new title for the first time, "the ship is ready for your inspection, and the department heads are standing by for your initial meeting." Walking through the Intrepid for the first time as her commanding officer, Sarah was struck by the complexity and responsibility that now rested on her shoulders. Every system, every sailor, every operational capability was now under her command. The engineering spaces that had been her professional home for over a decade now represented just one aspect of her responsibilities. Her first meeting with the department head set the tone for her command philosophy. Rather than immediately imposing changes or establishing new policies, Sarah spent the session listening and learning about the ship's current state, ongoing challenges, and the crew's assessment of their own capabilities. Lieutenant Maria Rodriguez, the engineering officer, briefed Sarah on recent maintenance issues and upcoming repair schedules. Lieutenant David Chen, the operations officer, outlined the ship's training status and readiness for deployment. Lieutenant Commander Patterson provided an overview of administrative matters and crew welfare issues. What impressed Sarah most was the open and professional dialogue that emerged from the meeting. The department heads were clearly experienced and competent, but they were also cautious about their new commanding officer. Sarah recognized the dynamic immediately. They were evaluating her just as much as she was evaluating them. "I want to be very clear about my expectations," Sarah told them at the conclusion of the meeting. "This ship has an excellent reputation, and I intend to maintain and enhance that reputation. I believe in aggressive training, rigorous maintenance standards, and taking care of our sailors. But I also believe in listening to the expertise of my officers and petty officers. You know this ship and this crew better than I do right now, and I'm counting on your experience and judgment to help me make good decisions." The first few weeks of Sarah's command were devoted to intensive training and evaluation. She pushed herself to learn every aspect of the ship's operations, spending time with sailors in every department and observing how they performed their duties. She also established a routine of walking through the ship at different times of day and night, making herself accessible to crew members and gaining first-hand knowledge of how the ship operated around the clock. Her first major test came sooner than expected. 3 weeks into her command, the Intrepid received emergency orders to respond to a distress call from a civilian cargo vessel that was taking on water approximately 200 miles west of San Diego. The merchant ship was carrying a mixed cargo including hazardous chemicals, and rough seas were making the situation increasingly dangerous. Sarah called the crew to general quarters and set course for the distressed vessel at maximum speed. As they raced through heavy seas toward the emergency, she found herself coordinating with Coast Guard rescue units, other Navy vessels in the area, and the merchant ship's crew via radio communications. The tactical situation was complex. The cargo vessel was listing heavily and in danger of capsizing, but the hazardous nature of her cargo meant that any rescue operation would have to be conducted with extreme caution. Weather conditions were deteriorating, with 15-foot seas and 30-knot winds making small boat operations dangerous. When the Intrepid arrived on scene, Sarah quickly assessed the situation and developed a rescue plan that balanced speed with safety. Rather than attempting to bring the merchant vessel alongside the frigate, which could result in a collision that might rupture cargo tanks, she decided to use the ship's helicopter and small boats to evacuate the merchant crew while maintaining a safe distance. The operation required precise coordination between the flight deck crew, boat crews, and the bridge team. Sarah positioned the Intrepid to provide a lee for the small boat operations while ensuring that the helicopter had a clear approach path to the merchant vessel. Throughout the 3-hour rescue operation, she maintained constant communication with all units while monitoring weather conditions and the stability of the distressed vessel. The rescue was completed successfully, with all 23 merchant crew members brought aboard the Intrepid without injury. The cargo vessel eventually foundered and sank, but the environmental impact was minimized by the rapid evacuation and the Coast Guard's ability to monitor the wreckage site. The successful rescue operation brought Sarah and her crew recognition from Pacific Fleet headquarters and media attention that highlighted the professional competence of the Intrepid's crew. But, more importantly for Sarah, it validated her command philosophy and demonstrated to her crew that their new captain could make sound decisions under pressure. Captain Patterson told her after the rescue operation was complete, "I've served under 8 different commanding officers in my career, and what you did out there today was textbook leadership. You assessed the situation quickly, made clear decisions, and trusted your crew to execute the plan. That's what command is all about." The remainder of Sarah's first year in command was marked by increasingly complex training exercises and operational assignments. The Intrepid participated in major fleet exercises in the Western Pacific, conducted drug interdiction operations in the Eastern Pacific, and served as escort for high-value units transiting through sensitive areas. Each operation added to Sarah's experience and reputation as a commanding officer. She developed a command style that emphasized thorough preparation, clear communication, and aggressive execution while maintaining the highest standards for crew welfare and ship maintenance. Her approach earned the respect of both her crew and her peers in the surface warfare community. The ship's performance under Sarah's command was exceptional. The Intrepid received the Battle Efficiency Award for her class, recognition for outstanding performance in fleet exercises, and commendations for several successful operational missions. More importantly, crew morale was high, and retention rates were well above fleet averages. Sarah's success in command led to her selection for promotion to commander and assignment to a staff position at Pacific Fleet headquarters, where she would serve as the Assistant Operations Officer for Surface Warfare. The assignment represented a significant step forward in her career progression and provided her with exposure to strategic planning and fleet-level operations. The staff assignment was intellectually challenging in ways that were different from command at sea. Instead of focusing on the operational details of a single ship, Sarah was now involved in planning and coordinating the activities of dozens of ships across the entire Pacific Ocean. The work required a broader perspective on naval operations and an understanding of how tactical decisions fit into larger strategic objectives. Working at Fleet headquarters also gave Sarah insight into the political and administrative aspects of naval leadership that she had only glimpsed during her previous assignments. She participated in budget planning sessions, contributed to strategic assessments, and observed how senior officers balanced competing priorities and limited resources. One of her major projects involved developing new training protocols for surface warfare units operating in contested environments. The project required Sarah to work closely with intelligence analysts, operational planners, and training specialists to create realistic scenarios that would prepare ship crews for the complex challenges they might face in future conflicts. The assignment also provided Sarah with her first exposure to joint operations planning, working with officers from the Air Force, Army, and Marine Corps on integrated training exercises and operational concepts. She quickly learned that effective joint operations required not just tactical coordination, but a deep understanding of how different military cultures and operational philosophies could be integrated into cohesive plans. After 2 years at Pacific Fleet headquarters, Sarah was selected for command of the USS Guardian, a newer destroyer that was considered one of the most advanced surface combatants in the Navy. The assignment represented another significant milestone in her career. Destroyer command was traditionally seen as a pathway to senior leadership positions, and success in this role would position her for consideration for promotion to captain. The Guardian was a technological marvel, equipped with the latest radar systems, missile defense capabilities, and combat management systems. But Sarah quickly learned that commanding a destroyer required not just technical expertise, but the ability to integrate multiple warfare specialties into a single, effective fighting unit. Her crew of 280 sailors included specialists in surface warfare, anti-submarine warfare, air defense, electronic warfare, and special operations support. Welding these diverse capabilities into an effective team required leadership skills that went beyond anything Sarah had experienced in her previous commands. The Guardian's first major deployment under Sarah's command took the ship to the Middle East, where tensions were rising due to regional conflicts and the threat of terrorist attacks against commercial shipping. The deployment would test every aspect of Sarah's leadership and the crew's capabilities in a genuinely hostile environment. The 6-month deployment included escort duties for high-value military and civilian vessels, participation in multinational naval exercises, and direct support for ground operations ashore. The Guardian's advanced capabilities made her a valuable asset for the fleet commander, and Sarah found herself regularly involved in high-level planning sessions that would have been beyond her reach just a few years earlier. During the deployment, the Guardian successfully intercepted several suspicious vessels, provided air defense for coalition forces, and conducted precision strikes against terrorist targets ashore. Each operation validated Sarah's command decisions and demonstrated the professionalism and competence of her crew. The successful deployment earned Sarah recognition as one of the Navy's most promising commanding officers and led to her selection for the Navy War College, where she would spend a year studying strategy, international relations, and advanced leadership concepts. The assignment was both an honor and a clear signal that the Navy was grooming her for senior leadership positions. At the War College, Sarah was exposed to strategic thinking at the highest levels of military planning. She studied historical case studies of naval operations, analyzed current geopolitical trends, and worked on theoretical problems that might shape future naval strategy. The academic environment encouraged critical thinking and challenged conventional approaches to military problems. Her research project focused on the changing nature of naval command in an era of rapid technological advancement and evolving threats. The project examined how traditional command structures and decision-making processes needed to adapt to the speed and complexity of modern naval operations. The year at the War College also provided Sarah with valuable networking opportunities, allowing her to build relationships with officers from other services and allied nations who would likely hold senior positions in their respective organizations. These relationships would prove valuable throughout her career as she moved into positions requiring coordination with other military services and international partners. When Sarah completed the War College program, she was promoted to captain and assigned as the commanding officer of Naval Station Pearl Harbor's Surface Warfare Training Facility. The assignment made her responsible for training hundreds of officers and sailors who would serve on surface combatants throughout the Pacific Fleet. The training command position was Sarah's first experience managing a large shore-based organization, with over 500 military and civilian personnel under her command. The challenge of leading such a diverse organization while maintaining the highest training standards required management skills that were different from but complementary to her seagoing experience. Under Sarah's leadership, the training facility developed innovative programs that better prepared surface warfare officers for the complex challenges they would face in operational assignments. She emphasized realistic training scenarios, integrated warfare exercises, and leadership development programs that recognized the changing demographics and expectations of Navy personnel. Her success in the training command led to recognition as one of the Navy's most effective senior officers and positioned her for consideration for flag rank. But Sarah was about to face a challenge that would test not just her professional competence, but her character and resilience in ways she had never imagined. The very institution she had served faithfully for over 2 decades was about to question her authority in a manner that would shake her faith in the system she had devoted her life to serving. In the world of military hierarchy, respect is earned through blood, sweat, and years of proving yourself worthy. But what happens when that respect is stripped away in a single moment of prejudice? What happens when a decorated officer finds herself standing before a room full of men who see only her gender, not her achievements? This is the story of Commander Sarah Mitchell, a woman who climbed every rung of the naval ladder through sheer determination, only to face her greatest challenge not on the battlefield, but in a conference room where her authority was questioned by the very system she had served faithfully for 22 years. Sometimes, the most powerful weapons aren't the ones that destroy, but the ones that reveal truth. Sometimes, 2 simple words can silence an entire room and change everything. This is that story, a story of courage, respect, and the moment when quiet dignity proved more powerful than loud authority.